With the 2024 election finally behind us, a lot of people have called and asked for my opinion and commentary about how the election is bound to impact whistleblowers. This video will discuss from a non-political prism. Our law firm Brown LLC is apolitical. We represent people from all walks of life, all across the aisle, and all over the country, if not the world. Our mission is fighting fraud irrespective of somebody's political beliefs. It all has to do with what their cause is and what the underlying information is that they want to report. I'm also speaking with you from a position where Brown LLC this year had the honor and privilege to date of being part of the largest whistleblower settlement in the country, the $950 million in aggregate Raytheon settlement, where our firm represented the whistleblower for at least one component, which is the $428 million False Claims Act settlement. So we've had a bead on what is successful. That case was heralded as the second biggest defense contractor False Claims Act settlement in history. And we had the honor or privilege of working with a wonderful, courageous whistleblower in that matter. As a former Department of Justice, FBI special agent, and legal advisor, I served under various administrations of different political ideology. I was myself very apolitical, and I perceived the people I worked with were as well. They worked for love of country. My perspective that I'm giving is just pure guesswork. When I say guesswork, the foundation of it is through experience, and thankfully my prism has been pretty accurate in forecasting, which is why our firm has been so successful over the years through various different administrations. The first thing we will talk about is the changing of the guard. It happens. When different parties take power, priorities change, leadership changes. It's just inevitable. One president said at one time, elections have consequences. One of the consequences is the power to appoint. The power to appoint individuals that head up the various agencies. So we can expect, as we've already seen in the news to date, there will be a different attorney general. Whether it's the instant nominee or someone else is yet to be seen. But there are also each individual United States Attorney's Office, and the United States Attorney's Office is the office that prosecutes, along with the Department of Justice, False Claims Act litigation. All of them serve at the pleasure of the president. And that's a term of art that people use. It's not something I'm trying to be fanciful about. And it's historically at the pleasure of the president. Every single United States attorney either has to resign or is fired. It's rare for somebody to stay on, but it does occur. I do not anticipate in this administration forthcoming that anybody will stay on. Everybody, I believe, will be fired or resign, and the new administration will appoint new people for the United States Attorney's Office, as well as a new head of the SEC, new head of the CFTC, and all the other different regulatory programs, IRS, FinCEN, every different program that whistleblowers have the ability to file into. How that impacts is various ways. First of all, unfortunately, there's a lot of uncertainty for a period of time. So there will be sluggishness. There's going to be uncertainty about who is staying and who's going. And just imagine yourself not knowing whether you're going to be fired or reallocated resource-wise. It may create a standstill or bottlenecking until that type of stuff sorts out. You can expect for any new cases that are filed, a 6-month to a year to 18-month delay before you get any traction. For the bigger cases, though, where the government is far along, I don't anticipate too much of a blowback. I think those cases will naturally progress at the pace that they're progressing and maybe even intensify depending if the investigation is consonant with the goals and priorities of the current administration. High-level management leaving, which will be the case, will fundamentally alter different priorities that the agency is prosecuting. What was important to the instant administration may be completely not important to the new administration. So cases in which agents, United States attorneys, assistant United States attorneys, other prosecutors, and trial attorneys for the government perceive that the new administration may not be receptive to, you can expect those to come to potentially a crawl and a standstill until the new administration weighs in and the priorities are broadcast clearly. Consistent with the changing in the guard, there is the changing priorities. And certain cases will be more fertile and more inclined for the government to pick up based upon the priorities of this incoming administration. For example, and again, I'm being apolitical, I'm just trying to read the tea leaves. President Trump talked quite a bit about tariffs, and he also talks about the tariffs on China. So if there's information from a False Claims Act customs fraud perspective about individuals or entities circumventing Chinese tariffs, those are likely to be picked up by the government and run with to make a point that these tariffs will be enforced. That does happen quite a bit with a concept known as transshipping. Transshipping is when the company conceals the country of origin, sometimes by shipping it to a different country and doing some superficial cosmetic change. For example, 98% of the product may be assembled in China. It may then be shipped to the Philippines. And in the Philippines, they may just put it in a box and try to colorably argue, even though it's not colorable at all, that it was actually substantively and substantially manufactured in the Philippines. That is not going to fly if the US government finds out about it under the current administration. The flip side of that is certain cases that look like they'd be fertile under this administration probably will be completely gutted under the new administration. And again, this is a forecast. This is not me weighing in politically at all. But ESG, where companies had to abide by certain administrative guidelines to impose ESG criteria in its investment and decision-making process, I think the new administration is going to probably revoke all those guidelines. And with the domino effect, any SEC whistleblower case brought along those lines may in fact be jeopardized and fatally done, even though there's an argument to be made that they were non-compliant with the guidelines at the time. I don't think the administration is going to welcome the optics of enforcing an ESG initiative. Now, again, this is just guesswork. They may very well continue, but I think if you look back at this video 1 or 2 years from now, you could tell me whether I'm right or I'm wrong, and generally have a good beat on these types of things. One thing to remember is that whistleblowers themselves, despite the priorities, are inherently bipartisan. A lot of the laws that are passed in Congress are passed through both sides of the aisles who legitimately want to stop the federal government from being defrauded and from consumers and other individuals from being harmed. Consequently, even though there is a new administration, I think they are going to keep pretty strong the whistleblower retaliation provisions that prohibit retaliation against individuals who come forth with information to blow the whistle. Another thing is that whistleblower programs, if handled efficiently, tend to make money for the government. If each year in the False Claims Act up to $3 billion is recovered or around there, well, that's $3 billion more worth of revenue for the government, minus the whistleblower fees, which could be 30%. So up to $1 billion for whistleblowers who do the right thing with the right counsel, netting $2 billion, which still is a profit for the country. And I don't want you to think about these False Claims Act whistleblower cases as being done for profit. They're being done to hold entities accountable. How is it profitable? Because the statute itself enables triple damages against the wrongdoer. So if someone commits $100 million worth of fraud against the taxpayer, through the initiative of the government, you're receiving the $100 million back that should have been paid in the first place, at least another $100 million, generally a double to $200 million, and sometimes a triple or close to it. So even after you pay, let's say they max out a $100 million fraud, there's a $300 million settlement, and the government pays 20%, that's $60 million. That's $240 million. That's a net $140 million for the government for holding the fraudsters accountable, as well as broadcasting to others that the conduct will not be allowed to be committed in the future, and therefore saving the government other money through deterrence. Certain programs that are almost certainly to be hurt. Unfortunately, the IRS whistleblower program, which is inherently slow. It could take up to a decade or more. So we have some cases that are moving through from over 10 years ago. They had a new initiative to try to accelerate the timetables, but with at least what they've said leading up to the election, most likely they are going to gut the resources of the IRS. Now, if they're gutting the resources of the IRS, will it spill over to the whistleblower program? Most likely, yes. It remains to be seen, but if I had to use my crystal ball, I think that program, once again, will be stymied to some extent, and you're going to see a lot of friction in a program that's already glacial. With the Department of Justice, with the False Claims Act, the SEC whistleblower program, and the CFTC whistleblower program, I think they're going to look for cases that are crisp, outright fraud against the government. And one thing that this administration has asserted is that they're a law and order type of administration. And if that's the case, if companies are committing massive frauds, they should and could and will be held accountable, I think. So at the end of the day, I don't think it'll impact that. It'll just impact the pace until the new administration takes over and the changing of the guard occurs and the speed bumps and hiccups that occur with that. Medicare and Medicaid fraud still may be a priority of the administration because it affects seniors disproportionately, inherently, because that's the Medicare program. And I think the administration is going to want to be perceived as someone that is trying to cut fat and become more efficient. And if one of the efficiencies will be to route out fraud through Medicare and Medicaid. Now, also painting with a broad brush, there are certain cases that have survived that some people may perceive have been attenuated. And what do I mean by that? Cases in which maybe this present administration brought, settled, or are litigating that may be arguable. Arguable as in a coin flip. Arguable as in it's not entirely clear whether or not there's a consensus about whether the conduct is wrong or not, which also inherently creates a defense when these things occur. It may be that these types of cases that are gray or ambiguous are dropped by the current administration in deference to cases in which they believe that there is a stronger mandate and a consensus that the conduct is wrong. Also, even though whistleblowers will be protected, whistleblower awards may go down. Hopefully it won't, but there is a scale from 15 to 25% when the government intervenes in False Claims Act cases, when it doesn't intervene up to 30%, and in the SEC, IRS, AML, CFTC up to 30% as well. And the administration may, but not certainly may, but may try to reduce those awards. And I drop that with a footnote because, again, you have bipartisan support to keep them at a premium in order to incentivize individuals who are well placed to step forward in order to keep the system running smoothly. And speaking about keeping the system from running smoothly, there's a new initiative for government efficiency itself. And with that, you have a couple of people tasked, Elon Musk, Vivek, and I apologize, I can't pronounce his last name very well, but they're both dedicated, at least, are going to be appointed to this new committee that's looking to really cut out the fat of government. That also could make some of these cases more sluggish, but if really their mandate is government efficiency, one of the components of efficiency is rooting out fraud. And I think if they take a good hard look with the right people about how to become more efficient, they will incentivize the whistleblowers to step forward to help root out the fraud. So potentially there is an upside to this, but again, that remains to be seen. Whistleblowers still remain critical for improving the system. I predict whistleblower awards will still occur. Hundreds of millions of dollars for the next 4 years each year will go to whistleblowers, if not billions of dollars. We're working here at Brown LLC as some of the biggest, most important cases in the country, if not the world. We have that pleasure and luxury. We have that fortune to work with individuals we like to work with, and we're very selective about the cases we take. But as you see, we just participated in a case that nearly resulted in $1 billion recovery in aggregate for the government. And we think our firm, at least, will continue to have those successes with the new administration as well as with the old administration. And we're committed to help whistleblowers and guide them through the process. So if you're aware of any fraud, and you want to understand, number one, whether or not it's actionable, and number two, whether or not it's going to have any impact about the new administration. While we don't have a crystal ball, we do have some pretty good, solid forecasting. Nothing is ever guaranteed. And in fact, I've touted a couple times some of our bigger settlements today, but past results don't guarantee future success. What I can guarantee to you is that you take the time to call our firm, Brown LLC, we'll give you a free confidential consultation and walk you through what your rights are and what potential trajectories they are for the new year. I thank you for listening to this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to call the office, 877-561-0000, or send us an email. If you have any feedback or you want to make any comments, please don't reveal anything confidential publicly. Email us. But if you'd like to hear me talk about a topic, please feel free to send something below and we'll do so. Thank you, everybody.